This is the AWS Morning Brief Security Edition. AWS is fond of saying security is job zero. That means it's nobody in particular's job, which means it falls to the rest of us. Just the news you need to know, none of the fluff. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends at Minio, the high-performance Kubernetes native object store that's built for the multi-cloud, creating a consistent data storage layer for your public cloud instances, your private cloud instances, and even your edge instances, depending upon what the heck you're defining those as, which depends probably on where you work. It's getting that unified is one of the greatest challenges facing developers and architects today. It requires S3 compatibility, enterprise-grade security and resiliency, the speed to run any workload, and the footprint to run anywhere, and that's exactly what Minio offers. With superb read speeds in excess of 360 gigs and a 100 megabyte binary that doesn't eat all the data you've got on the system, it's exactly what you've been looking for. Check it out today at min.io/download and see for yourself. That's min.io/download, and be sure to tell them that I sent you. A somehow quiet week as we all grapple with the recent string of security failures from, well, take your pick, really. A bit late, but better than never, Okta's CEO admits the Lapsus $ hack has damaged trust in the company. The video interview is surprisingly good in parts, but he ruins the third party this, third party that. No, it was our responsibility and our failure statement by then saying that they no longer do business with Sitel, the third party who was responsible for part of this breach. Crisis comms is really something to figure out in advance of a crisis so you don't get in your own way. Paul Vixie, creator of a few odds and ends such as DNS, has taken a job as a distinguished engineer/VP at AWS, and I look forward to misusing more of his work as databases. He's apparently in the security org, which is why I'm talking about it today and not Monday. And of course, as I've been ranting about in yesterday's newsletter and on Twitter, Ubiquiti has sued Brian Krebs for defamation. Frankly, they come off as far worse for this than they did at the start. My position has really shifted from one of sympathy to, well, time to figure out who sells a 10 gigabit per second switch that isn't them. This episode is sponsored in part by LaunchDarkly. Take a look at what it takes to get your code into production. I'm going to just guess that it's awful because it's always awful. No one loves their deployment process. What if launching new features didn't require you to do a full-on code and possibly infrastructure deploy? What if you could test on a small subset of users and then roll it back immediately if results aren't what you expect? LaunchDarkly does exactly this. To learn more, visit launchdarkly.com and tell them Corey sent you and watch for the wince. AWS had an interesting post, Best Practices, Securing Your Amazon Location Service Resources. AWS makes a good point here. It hadn't occurred to me that you need to treat location data particularly specially, but of course you do. The entire premise of the internet falls apart if it suddenly gets easier to punch someone in the face for something they said on Twitter. And two tools of note this week for you. Access Undenied parses AWS Access Denied CloudTrail events, explains the reasons for them, and offers actionable fixes. And AWS-keys-sec tool does something that's obvious in hindsight, making sure that any long-lived credentials on your machine are access restricted to your own IP address. Check it out. And that's what happened last week in AWS security. Continue to make good choices because it seems very few others are these days. Thank you for listening to the AWS Morning Brief Security Edition. For the latest in AWS security that actually matters, please follow AWS Morning Brief on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever the hell it is you find the dulcet tones of my voice, and be sure to sign up for the Last Week in AWS newsletter at lastweekinaws.com.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.